Good morning. I'm going to start out with a reading. This reading is from William Ellery Channing, a book that he wrote called The Free Mind. I call that mind free, which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which does not content itself with passive and hereditary faith. And then he also says, I call that mind free, which resists the bondage of habit, which does not mechanically copy the past, nor live on in its old virtues. And that's the reading. My talk today is why I became a Unitarian. A while back, Iris asked me if I would do this talk. Excuse me?
Get closer to the mic.
A little more? Okay. How's that? I'm talking.
Can you hear back there? Yeah, it's a bit hard. It's hard to hear.
Hard to hear? I'm very soft-spoken, I've been told. I've always thought that I was pretty loud. It's my hearing aids. It's full bore right now. You got me?
There you go.
Okay, here we go. I was saying that a while back, I had gotten the word from Iris that I could speak this month, and particularly because it's about theological reflections. And I was all for it. And then the time came and she told me when I could do it, and I didn't realize it was going to be Easter. So I had to readjust a little bit. And so I'll start out by saying Happy Easter to all of you. And with that, this is the day, the very important day in the life of Christians, and in my understanding, most Catholics. And this is the day, the most important day, because this is the day that Jesus of Nazareth rose from the dead. Now, that sounds like a pretty incredible thing to do. Well, that is what he did according to the story, and he was seen by his disciples, his followers, the next day and the next week. He was showing up with them. And that is an indication that Jesus had overcome death by his supposed dying of the body and then raising up beyond death itself. You know, I've been a lifelong Catholic. All this time, I've been from year one celebrating Easter Sunday. All the way since I was a little boy, and the first thing I really knew about Easter was that was the day the Easter Bunny was coming, and he was going to bring stuff for little boys. The ones that were good, of course. And so I had to work for that, try to get into that gang, be on the right side. And that's very interesting, because a lot of it that comes after pretty much has to do about the same thing. Many of us here, as far as the resurrection goes, have various understandings. Some it's very little significance, and to some, it's no significance at all. They've come through a different process of learning about the afterlife, the spiritual life, and so forth, and who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. It's all different. And even though we think we have been in the same religion, we still are our understanding, not someone else's. And again, has to do with my story. Jesus taught us by his resurrection that no matter what we do, no matter what mistakes we make, we can rise up. We can get back on track and move ahead. That's the story of his life, and that is the extended story of the resurrection. It's not just the one day, it's not just there will be afterlife, it's just keep on keeping on. Jesus did that, and you can too. And by what he had to go through at the end, he was saying, you may think it's rough, but I've been through some rough stuff too. And that's where I come to here in telling my story. I've been a searcher all my life. I left home right after high school. And at that point in time, I joined what a religious order called the Christian Brothers. And I stayed with that group for 13 years. And that group, if you recall, many of you probably know about the Christian Brothers because they taught school here. In 1959, they started the school here in Quincy. That's now, what's the name of it now? Christian Brothers it was in
Quincy, Notre Dame.
Quincy, Notre Dame now. I still call it Christian Brothers. Anyway, I came through 13 years of being in the Brothers and came to the point where I realized that although I had dedicated my life to this way of living because I thought it was the best way that I could honor God, I had to leave. I didn't have the passion that I had when I was 18 and 19. So I had to leave, and I had to go to some place. I didn't quite have a good idea of what I was going to. But through my travels as a Christian brother, I had come to Quincy. I had gotten to know the community. Some of the people in here were incredible. And in my mind, if ever I did quit, I would probably come back here, and that is exactly what I did. I brought myself back here, and at that point in time, I had my degree and was able to get a job at Chaddock School, teaching, counseling, and then I became the director of vocational education. Now, where did I get the information to be able to do that? Well, when I was in the Brothers, I went around to all the different schools, and anything that they needed to be done, myself and 3-4 other brothers would do it. If it was a remodeling job, we'd do it. If it was a plumbing job, we'd do it. And that way we saved a lot of money for the brothers who their job was to teach those kids. Ours was to help them along. And so I had learned a lot of skills. Not that I use that much anymore, by the way. I'm not looking for a project here. But with that, I went on then to Two Rivers. I worked there because I was I was at that point being able to get youth jobs. I was a job trainer and getting kids into different jobs in town. And then I went on to John Wood and taught there. I had done a real good job of teaching at Chaddock. They were tough kids. But I had some information from the streets of Chicago that pretty much matched theirs. And we got along pretty well. And I'll say one thing about that. The thing that saved me was I got the idea and the recognition to be sure to tell them, particularly when they were in trouble, that they were very special. They were the guys that, when it came to following what your heart was telling you to do, you did it. Now, the problem was some of the things that you did were out of line. Then you got some work to do in terms of finding what the rules are and follow those. But what you have is courage and determination within yourself. And in many ways, you're doing much better than those guys that are saying, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and I'll do exactly what you say, ma'am. You think it out and you do it your way, and that is being a full human being. And I got along pretty well with them. That is, if they were fighting and the whole cottage went up, I could go into the room and say, okay, that's enough, stop. And they would stop. I'm a little guy, but they would. And so I learned a lot there, and then I went to John Wood Community College because I realized that I had something to deliver. And so I started teaching teachers how to teach and how to discipline and how to be a good teacher. And I did that then for another 13 years. And then we get to another point. I wanted to tell you about, through that time, I had gotten married, and I was married for 25 years until 10 years ago, my wife passed away. Mary was a very devout Catholic, and we were both attending church every Sunday. Now understand, being a practicing Catholic, it's imperative, it's required that you go to church every Sunday. And if you don't, well, you commit a sin. You commit a sin and, well, you know, on the other side, you're on the other side now, just like I was when I was a little boy. I wasn't worthy anymore. And so I kept doing that and kept doing that with Mary. And as things moved along and she passed away, I was at loose ends. I was really at loose ends. She was my rock. She had a lot of difficulties physically, medically, and for the last 4 or 5 years or so, it was very tough for her. But what was incredible about that was I always felt like she was the caretaker. She'd tell me the right things at the right time and keep me going. And that was the kind of person that she was. But now she isn't with me anymore, and I'm at loose ends again. And so I go to church, I try to make it work. She's not there, and it's empty. There's no passion. There's nothing there. And I have to start taking a look. What is going on here? So here I was. What was I going to do if I did leave? Again, you understand what my formation was. If I go, what happens? Do I die? Do I live eternity in hell or someplace? I started to recognize that really what was holding me in religion was fear. Fear of what? Well, in this particular instance, it was fear of the requirements of the very religion that Jesus, who spoke about love, was supposed to have. Well, he didn't really start it, but his name was hooked to it. He was the reason for the Catholic or Christian Church. And here I am, afraid. It's making me afraid, not freeing me. For those who are nodding their heads to some extent and know what I'm talking about in terms of how religion can get a grip of your soul, and those who don't, those who can't fathom what I'm really talking about as far as the depths of the hooks that held me into inaction, I wanted to act and take the risk of walking my own walk and accepting the consequences of the challenging God himself, herself, I mean. But the consequences of that act of rebellion was pounded into me from childhood on, as I said. And to refuse to accept the value of remaining loyal to the church of my birth meant that I would go to hell or something worse. And when I thought about and tried to make that change, I finally broke free, but I was free, in free fall. I was in free fall. I had nothing then. It was empty. I had nowhere to go. Through the years, however, I got a grip of that. And in fact, while I was still in the Catholic Church, I just wanted to say that there were some things that I did that were pretty valuable and effective. I did learn a lot about Zen Buddhism, and that became a side deal for me. Still was Catholic. And in fact, going back to Mary, one time we were leaving St. Peter's Catholic Church. And I was coming out, both of us were heading for the car, and I was just ripping about that sermon and about what that priest was saying and what I thought of it and so forth. And Mary said, "Jim, stop that. Why are you doing that? Why don't you just do what you really want to do? Why don't you go down to the river and sit on the riprap there and just watch the water go down the river and calm yourself like you do?" Well, that was quite an idea coming from her too, because really I thought I was going to church for her. I'll go, she loves to go, and I'll go. But you'd think that I would have taken that on and jumped on it. No, I said, you could do that, but it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out. The job is to hang in there, to be loyal, to hold in there when the going gets rough. Eventually, as I said, after Mary passed away, I was really empty, and I had to do something. I started to look around. I found the Unity Church of Quincy, and I went there for a while, and it was really, really helpful In fact, I met Deborah Lee there. But I won't go into it too deeply, but because of the administration, because of the conflict in thinking and the board and so forth, things were starting to fall apart. And it wasn't serving me anymore, nor a number of the other members. So I moved on from there and started looking, and just about that time I was invited to a talk, or rather a First Friday by the Unitarian Church. Oh man. Went to Rob Manning's and I met some incredible people. And they were talking like I was feeling. And I decided to come. And I came. And that was 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm still here. Still going to First Fridays too. And that's when I started to get serious, saying this is something I gotta know. And so I started reading and studying the tenets of the UU and discovered some things that I found nowhere else. First of all, I learned the 7 principles that you received today. And I realized that they were exactly that. They were principles. They were what you stand on as a guide, not dogma, not doctrine, not a requirement for membership, a guide. See what you think of it, enter it into your heart if it fits. If it doesn't, accept and move on. I found I was entering a group whose founders created a religious refuge from the oppressive attitudes and practices engendered by ideological, dogmatic thinking. As Jerry Coyne from the University of Chicago said, of all the existing religions that claim to be religious, the Unitarian Universalist seems to be the least dogmatic and therefore the least harmful, and perhaps the most liberal and tolerant, unquote. And I'll tell you, I found this congregation to not only be tolerant, but to embrace all. Look around here and see who is here and see what their backgrounds are. Many different than mine, some similar to some extent, but all accepting. The Unitarian theology and structure is not top down. It's not a central authority which makes the final judgments on what to believe and what is forbidden. In fact, our UU conversation are independent and self-determining, and we even pick our own ministers. Our congregation is a leader in social justice activities in our community, and that was one of the very first things that I learned about here when I first came to Quincy. That UU church, they're the ones that are out there. They're the ones that are doing it for the community. But then, of course, I was Catholic. So. Since I've been here now, I've learned so much. I've learned many things about women's rights and the LGBTQ community and their difficulties and being embraced by this group. Finally, I can say I have found a safe place here with supportive theology that helps me grow and make my own decisions on how I live my life, without the fear of making a mistake that will condemn me for all eternity. That's no longer on my plate. It's gone. Frankly, I can say that this community has provided me with the space to see the width and the breadth of the spiritual spectrum, and not making judgments on any known spiritual journey, particularly based on previous prejudices. I have learned to judge what works for me by finding what resonates in my heart truth and trust that voice to help me develop my own personal religion. My own personal religion. Religion with a little r. Personal religion. Lastly, I want to say very clearly and that the insights I have gained through the UU experience has been, in their way, a personal resurrection or renewal of my spirit, of my theology, of my understanding of God and the purpose and reason for Jesus, and my freedom to explore what works for me and what sustains me. And for that, and for you, I am very grateful. Thank you.